Hi, everyone. Welcome to Indie Feature Friday. My name is Tanaz Bhathena, and I'm the author of young adult novels such as A Girl Like That, The Beauty of the Moment, and most recently, Hunted by the Sky. Today, I'm delighted to be speaking with Khary Mathurin from Another Story Bookshop. This Indie Feature Friday is the final conversation of Penguin Random House Canada's online campaign in support of Canadian independent booksellers. Mark your calendars because tomorrow, Saturday, August the 29th, is Canadian Independent Bookstore Day. We'd love for you to plan to buy a book from your local independent bookseller or help spread the word by following Penguin Random CA and the hashtag CIBD. As mentioned, today we're shining a spotlight on Another Story Bookshop, an independent bookstore in the West End of Toronto with 30 years of history, offering a broad range of literature for children, young adults, and adults with a focus on themes of social justice, equity, and diversity. Before I ask Khary to join in, two quick Zoom reminders. The chat can be activated at the bottom of your screen, and you can comment along or add reactions as you see fit. If you'd like to submit questions for us, you can submit them through the Q&A button that you can activate from the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to them, as many as we can, toward the end. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Khary Mathurin. Hi, Khary. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing well. How are you?
I am good. We are so excited to have you here and learn more about Another Story Bookshop. So why don't you get started by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got into bookselling?
Sure. Well, I guess depending on how far back you want to go, I've always been obsessed with bookstores. Like talk to anyone in my family. That's usually if we were in the mall or wherever as a child, I would always be drawn to the bookstore and usually hang out there while they do whatever. So eventually I ended up working at the world's biggest bookstore, which is an old bookstore that doesn't exist anymore. That used to be very big. It was like a bowling alley that was converted into a bookstore at Yonge and Dundas. So I worked there for a little while, and then after a few years, I had the opportunity to work here at Another Story, and I took it. In the meantime, I had been working at a museum, so I kind of missed being around books and like making recommendations and book selling. So I decided, why not? And Another Story sort of fit exactly like, yeah, the kinds of books I'm interested in. So it seemed like a good idea.
That is so wonderful. I really like that you mentioned how you used to be the kid that would go to the bookshop and just sit there. Like, for me, I was the same, exactly the same, and I just love that. So you are the education support manager at Another Story Bookshop. What
That's
does
right.
that specifically involve?
Well, it usually involves talking to teachers, teacher librarians, and other educators about titles that they need for either classroom teaching, for curriculum support, or for filling out their library shelves. So often, because Another Stories focuses on social justice and equity, usually schools are coming to us with, looking for help, looking for suggestions on a certain type of title or certain themes. And I usually work with educators to figure out, what would work best for them, and then do the like nitty gritty, like back end of ordering and delivery as well.
Okay, that's really fantastic, and that's really, I think, unique to Another Story as well. So Another Story Bookshop has been running for 3 decades, which is truly, truly remarkable. Can you
Mm-hmm.
give viewers a little bit of insight into the store's history and what makes working over there so special?
Sure. So Another Story was founded by the late owner, Sheila Kaufman, back in 1987, which is just a year after I was born. So it's really, really funny to be involved with a business that's been around almost as long as you've been alive. And originally it started on the Danforth, and she was working with her partner, the time Peter, I believe. It moved a couple of times and eventually ended up on Roncesvalles. The focus has, for most of that time, been on, social justice, equity, and throughout the 90s, the children's book section that has sort of expanded to the point where it's like about half the store now, and having those values throughout the selection of those books as well. So Sheila died in 2017, I believe, and so we've been sort of carrying on her legacy since then. And working here is great because, well, first of all, my coworkers are really amazing, and everyone is generally pretty like-minded, or has everyone has their own worldviews and stuff like that, but usually when it comes to ideas about equity, about social justice, they're usually sort of right where you are, and they understand the store's role, and we all work together to ensure that we fulfill that as best as possible, and then we laugh a lot while we do it too.
Laughing a lot with your coworkers is really, really wonderful, and I think that makes the day pass by faster. I remember once when I went to a bookstore, the bookseller recommended my own book to me without knowing I was the author, and that was a really cool experience for me. So I wanted to know if there are any heartwarming, funny, or even downright strange customer experiences that you had while you were working at the store. Could you share them with us?
Interesting. I mean, we do have a lot of, we have had some interesting customers. We love them all. Some have a penchant for very long phone messages with very detailed descriptions of any given thing, but they're wonderful. I actually really enjoy listening to them because it's sort of like listening to someone with a very poetic mind just sort of go on for a long time, which is not a typical experience you normally get. But then there's other folks who, for instance, we have a regular customer who has been coming since I've been working here. So I've been working here this is in September, it'll be 6 years. And I think he's been coming here since I've been here. And so since he was a young teenager, and all of us have been able to sort of see him and grow up with him, basically, to the point where we feel very connected. He gave us a card when he was moving out of the city. It was very sweet, and it's very interesting that you get to interact with people at very formative years, and they feel similarly very connected to the shop and the rest of the people who work here as well.
That is so lovely. I really love that story about you watching your customer grow up along, as the years pass by. And that's really wonderful. And that's really something that makes me love independent bookstores personally, because you form that sort of family-like connection with the store where you go in and you can tell the people working there that I want this book, and they will make sure that they get it for you whenever it happens. It's such a wonderful thing. So how has Another Story adapted to the challenges with COVID-19? Have there been any changes that you think you'll be implementing in the future?
Well, since COVID, there have been a number of, as with many other bookshops and other retail spaces, there have been a lot of challenges. Lately, we've been doing mostly curbside pickup and online ordering. And slowly we're sort of shifting to a takeout window format where people can come to the store. They aren't able to actually come inside the store just yet, but we'll fulfill their orders at the door if we have what they're looking for, or put something on order that way. And eventually there will be, we'll have customers come back into the store again, but it's kind of an interestingly laid out space. It is long, but kind of narrow. So with the sort of restrictions of social distancing, there likely will be restrictions on how many customers will be allowed to be in the store at a given time. In general, more plexiglass or barriers, which has sort of been the case everywhere. Yeah, I would say that. And just, I think generally trying to, meet customers where they're at, which may not necessarily be in a physical space, like trying to do more engagement over social media, which we already do, but finding other ways to engage folks might be necessary going forward, especially if we can't like see everyone at once in the store at the same time and everything.
Yeah, I think so. Or, you can just put on those bubble things that the Jetsons used to wear in back in the day, with the cartoon. Just put that on, and
Yeah.
that's a good way to maintain social distancing and still see someone in person.
You're the first person to mention that to me, but that makes a lot of sense. I need to look into like some sort of bubble.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
You just started talking. I was thinking, what if we just put that bubble in, like like the Jetsons used to do way back then.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what books are totally flying off your shelves right now? Are there any pandemic book trends that you're seeing?
Well, I wouldn't. So the main thing would probably be everything to do with, the ongoing like Black Lives Matter protesting with like George Floyd and Jacob Blake. That has been a pretty big thing in the last, I guess, a couple months. So it's kind of been the same 5 books. So like Desmond Cole's book, Skin We're In, which I love because it's more of a Canadian focus. But then there's stuff like, White Fragility, and I'm forgetting one, but Between the World and Me is another one. There's some others, but a lot of anti-racist books about race and anti-racism have been really flying, both on the retail end with like customers coming to grips with, various ways that they think about race, and on the educator side, which is kind of heartening to see. Like there have been a couple of schools or boards that sort of disseminating a lot of this material to their teachers. So hopefully like a lot of good can come of that. But also I noticed like that a lot of folks, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, were ordering things that aren't current. Like it's almost like people were thinking, I have a lot of time, I'm going to read this book that I've always meant to read, and have ordered it. So that was an interesting trend. It's a little bit less the case now, but I noticed that at when I was working again in the store in around May.
That is really cool that you mentioned that. And it's true what you said about the fact that people are actually going back to their backlist books and they're starting to read the stuff that they bought maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I know a lot of people were tagging me online saying they're reading my very first book during the midst of the pandemic. And I said, why did you pick that one of all? You're going to cry at the end of it. You realize that, right?
Yeah.
They were all reading it. And my friends were telling me, write something happy, this time around. And I said, they're all reading the sad one. Why should I read the happy stuff? But anyway, so that's another thing. Since we are talking about diverse titles, what diverse Canadian titles would you tell educators to add to their school libraries right now?
Okay, Canadian, you say. Let's see. So there's a couple new ones that I was reading. So I'll be doing workshop with Fold later on this year. So I was reading a couple of books. There's A Place Inside Me. I don't know if it's a Canadian publisher, but it's Zeta Elliott, who is a Canadian writer.
Love Zeta. Okay.
Yeah, which is really good and really speaks to the moment now. It's like a series of poems, or like more like a longer lyric poem from the perspective of like a young Black child. and so like addressing sort of the injustices that he sees, but also ideas of self-worth and stuff like that. It's pretty good. There's also Salma and the Syrian Chef. I'm looking at this like right over there. And that one is really good, by Danny Ramadan, who is a Syrian Canadian. And it's about a girl trying to cheer up her mom who's missing her dad, who's back in Syria, and doing that through trying to cook like a Syrian meal for her. It's very sweet, really, really sweet book. Some others. I like Shinchi Echo. That one is really good, and there's a sequel. The name is missing it now, but it's a really beautiful, poetic book featuring like indigenous characters. It's about residential schools, so it's very good. Yeah.
Oh, those are some fantastic recommendations. I'm making notes as I go along as well. So what books would you like to see more of in Canadian Kidlit? I know you and I were talking before we started the live. Do you think there are specific gaps that need to be filled?
Yeah, totally. I think they're definitely like in terms of Black authors in kids lit, it's like there's a huge gap. I mean, that's not to say that there isn't anyone out there, but because obviously like people like Zeta are there, but there, especially Black men, there aren't really that many, right? Like who are being published for picture books and for young adult books. Let's see, and this is especially, and for graphic novels, for instance, they're definitely like there's quite a few. There's quite a good representation for Indigenous folks in graphic novels, but it's really only one press, and then for everyone else who's like other people of color, there isn't really that much, especially in the young adult range, I should say. So that's sorry, were you asking about young adult? I feel like
no,
I kind of jumped to that.
No, I'm asking for all of Kidlit, so you can talk about picture books, young adult, doesn't matter.
Cool. Yeah. So for young adult graphic novels especially, there's like a pretty big lack there. Just generally, especially among the younger like age ranges, there needs to be more, like Black and Indigenous and people of color being published, because it's, I mean, as much as we love like having like people like yourself and other authors who we can like recommend, but it's like you always like there's more. You want
there's
more.
Always more. There are more that needs to be done. We're just like the tip of the iceberg, right? And do you think that the US is doing a better job in terms of bringing out more diverse titles for children's literature in particular compared to Canada?
I mean, it does seem to be the case. It's hard to know whether that's just a matter of like scale, but there are, like, I don't want to give the impression that there are no like diverse Canadian titles, because there definitely are, but there are some times when folks are looking for very specific things, characters of certain backgrounds. It's like, oh, we have to often turn to like American kids lit in order to find something that covers that. So yeah, that does seem to be the case. It does seem like in kids lit, Canada needs to catch up a little bit.
Yeah, and I totally agree, as an author as well, and as someone who wants to read more diverse Canadian fiction, especially in Kidlit. Yeah, I definitely agree that we need to do more, a lot more. Publishers, are you listening? All right. Okay. Enough of that. But is there an upcoming title that you're especially excited to read?
Let's see. So there is Punching the Air, which is kind of like a novel in verse, which is one of the kinds of books I'm pretty interested in, usually pretty into poetry. So I tend to like especially this new trend of YA, more and more novels in verse being published. So it's like E.B. Zaboy, who did American Street.
Yeah.
And she's collaborated with one of the, I guess known as Central Park Five, who are exonerated. So she collaborated with one of them to write about a boy who's been unjustly imprisoned, and the poems are pretty powerful. Yeah, it's great. So I am excited for that. I think that's coming out very soon, maybe next month.
I think so. Is it in fall? It's in the fall.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah, it's in fall. Yeah, so that one seems really cool. Yeah, let's see. There's in terms of yeah, I'd say that one. Sorry, all the ones I can think of are things that have already been published.
You can recommend those as well. It's not a problem.
Yeah, there's like we've done a launch for Morgan Parker, who did wrote Magical Negro, the poetry book, and she wrote a young adult novel, and that one is really great. It's not new, it's maybe from fall 2019, but
it's still pretty new.
I recommend it. I recommend it to everyone. It's like about a young girl who suffers from depression, who's Black in a majority like white town. So it's sort of about her discovering basically the will to live, or like what living is for, and discovering her own identity in the process. So that one I love, and always like try and press into people's hands.
That is Who Put the Song On by Morgan Parker, correct?
That's right. Yep.
Yes. Okay, that's perfect. How can people best support Another Story Bookshop right now?
Well, buying books.
Buy the books.
Buying books would be a start. We can also do gift certificates, like either physical copies or digital copies. Those can really go a long way. I know it's hard, like during this time where it's pretty uncertain for everyone, but yeah, just supporting your local bookstore, like supporting Another Story, finding ways to get us to source your books as opposed to Amazon. Didn't want to bring up Amazon, but I guess it's inevitable. Yeah, that would be the best way to support us, really.
Okay, so definitely purchase from your local booksellers, support Canadian independent booksellers. That is super important to support local businesses. And before we go into audience questions, I've read that you are a DJ when you are not selling books. People, Khary has a SoundCloud. I am going to share the SoundCloud link in the chat.
Right.
And I would like to know, Khary, what would the soundtrack of your life be like right now?
Well, what would the soundtrack be like? It really varies. I do DJ. I play a lot of dance music. Like my coworkers could probably attest. Yesterday we were just listening to techno all day, which is my fault. So probably that. I think especially because lately I've been trying to exercise more, and like very intense pounding dance music tends to make me feel more energized and like ready to run. So maybe that, but then on other days I just want to hear very like soft, like ambient music. So a variety of things, really. It kind of depends on my mood.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So before we get to audience questions, I would like to share that Penguin Random House Canada is doing a $100 gift card giveaway for you to shop online at Another Story. And we'll be sharing the link in the chat box right now. So check it out and enter for a chance to win. So now what we're going to do is open up the floor to questions. Let's see here. Okay, so anonymous attendee asks, how have your own reading habits changed since the pandemic started?
Okay. Well, I think I think we were talking a little bit earlier. Originally at the beginning of the pandemic, I found it very difficult to concentrate on a lot of things. So I listened to some audiobooks and podcasts initially to sort of get that focus back, even if it's not actually reading. Like, well, I mean, you are absorbing a text, but you're not like physically reading the book. And then eventually I sort of started with like shorter books, like Frying Plantain and book Cleanness. Those ones are shorter. Actually, now that I think about it, they're both broken up into they're both like novels ish, but they're also short stories. Like they're broken down into like smaller pieces that are fully formed themselves. So I think that was how I got my concentration back, in the sense that I was able to have these short bursts of focus, and then eventually I kind of built it back up. And now I find funny, now that you can actually go outside a lot more often, I find I'm reading a lot or like a lot more, probably because I'm seeing like the fall things that are coming in and wanting to absorb them more. So there's that.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned listening to more podcasts and stuff like that earlier on. I was also listening to a lot of audiobooks when the pandemic began. I remember listening to The Downstairs Girl by Stacey Lee. I really loved that. I also listened to The Bells by Donielle Clayton. Absolutely loved that book as well. So yeah, I actually started getting into audiobooks a lot when the pandemic started. I think it took me away to a different space, and I loved that. So the second question for Khary and Tanaz, if it's not too personal, how do you organize your bookshelves at home? You want to go first?
Yes. Well, and originally I would say until maybe I find every time I move, I kind of reassess like my book situation and what titles I want to keep, what I want to leave, and like how I want to organize it. And before the last summer, I didn't really organize them too well. Mostly just the things that I have been meaning to read at the top, and then everything else below. But then with the help of a friend of mine, I sort of organized my current bookshelf into kind of like sections like you would find at the bookstore, which is really funny that it took me that long to realize I could do that at home as well. So they're sort of organized by like fiction, certain types of literature, like poetry, that sort of thing. And I try to keep it in that order as best as possible, but sometimes I'm just sort of like flying through there to see what I'm interested in, and things get shelved. And I don't have a library tech to help me, so
I'm going to take some tips from you because
yeah.
I have the worst bookshelves. I have nothing organized. I have like this shelf which has all the books that I had as a kid and a teenager. So it's like the childhood Tanaz bookshelf is there, and then all the rest of my adulthood books are like stacked up on a table. Some are on a chair, some are on my piano. Like my piano is my bookshelf. This is ridiculous,
Right.
but it's an embarrassment. But yeah, this is so. Don't take any tips from me. I don't know how to
Yeah.
organize my shelf. Okay, another question. Do you have any book recommendations specifically for those of us who are having trouble getting through the current situation right now?
Yeah, I would probably go back to Frying Plantain. I think that one is pretty good, given the structure of it. You can like basically start a story at a time. And eventually it sort of builds into a larger picture of this like young girl's life. Also, I found it helped to that it was set in Toronto. There's like a Toronto-based book. And especially if you're not seeing like parts of the city, some people are kind of being more like localized now, I guess, to like minimize how much they're moving around the city. I guess it depends on who you are, but I find some people are doing that. So I found that it helped too to have places that I recognize, but also haven't seen in a while. So I kind of felt like, resituating myself in Toronto through reading, which I found helpful. Like it was like, like the story was good, the writing is excellent, but then it also has these other like hooks to keep you reading.
And for myself, if I had any recommendations, I usually look for escape. So I'm escaping the pandemic by jumping into
Right.
a different world. So that's why I was reading The Downstairs Girl by Stacey Lee. It's a book set in I think, 1920s Georgia, Atlanta. So the civil rights movement is going on as well. And it's a really fantastic, funny, witty book. I really loved it, about this Chinese American girl who is fired from her workplace, and then she poses as an anonymous advice columnist for a newspaper, and she calls herself Miss Sweetie, and it's really, really hilarious because she really throws some shade at those people who write into her, especially when in instances of sexism and racism. And it's really, really remarkable. I love that book so much. It was so funny. And that's why I also read a lot of fantasy, because I like to escape into a completely different world. So Bells by Daniel Clayton is another recommendation that I have, which I really liked. It was a really, it was a brilliant world, but at the same time, like, that world is worse than the one we're living in right now in a way. So that's something that I really would recommend. So the next question, from everything I hear lately, people are really down on the idea of buying books from Amazon. If it is so bad to do so, why are publishers selling to Amazon?
Well, I mean, I guess that I can't speak for the publishers. I guess it's the nature of business for them.
It's the evil of the business.
Yeah.
Amazon becomes the necessary evil to sell books sometimes for authors as well.
Right, exactly. It does help that the publishers do try and feature the independents and find ways to promote them, like this event that we're having right now. Moving the way, capitalism, basically. That's the answer.
It's the world we live in.
So, unfortunately, that is the case, yeah.
Okay, and the next question. If a young person asks you for a YA book recommendation, what are your go-tos?
Okay, how much time do we have? I tend to read, like, in terms of go-tos, I tend to read a lot of like queer YA, probably because it's like, oh, I wish I had this when I was a teenager. So some of my favorites of that are Aristotle and Dante and the Secrets of the Universe. Sorry, it's a long title.
Yeah,
but it's an excellent. No, I'm not muted. Okay. It's an excellent book. It's like this love story between two boys who are it is American. They're Latino, living in the southern, I believe it's New Mexico. And I like it because it really focuses on one of them and his inability to basically express himself in words, and the writing kind of like it kind of emulates that. It's very like short and to the point, a lot of the sentences, but eventually it really builds up into this like emotional experience, and their families are both very supportive, which is like so nice. I'm so tired of like the one of them dying in the end. So there's that. I really like Ghost, which is not queer YA, but it's like it's a middle grade book, so for like younger readers. It's like part of a series about this track team. I ran track, so I could I could understand some of the experience, but you don't even need to have any experience doing that to enjoy it. It's basically just like really Jason Reynolds. It's by Jason Reynolds. He's really good at exploring the viewpoint of like a young child and really getting into like this particular child Ghost's like anger issues and how that's stemming from his home life, and how through track he's able to like basically work through some of those feelings. So that's pretty cool. That one is one of my go-tos. What's it called? I'll Give You the Sun. I like that one. It's like one of those dual perspective novels, except instead of being chapter to chapter, it's like told the first half of the book is from the perspective of one twin, and then the back half of the book is from this perspective of another. I don't know, I think it's by
Jandy Nelson.
Jandy Nelson, yes, Jandy Nelson.
I love that book as well.
Just like her writing is so like
beautiful,
ecstatic. It's like, yeah, it's amazing. So that one is great. What's it called? Yeah, those are three that I really enjoy. There's one that's bubbling up in my mind, but I'm forgetting it right now. But how about yourself? What are some go-to ones that you enjoy?
So for me, I would definitely recommend My So-Called Bollywood Life by Nisha Sharma.
Right, yeah.
I really love that book because it's about this really fierce girl who wants to be a filmmaker, and she has her horoscope set out that this is the guy you're supposed to marry or whatever, and she has this very very, very strong-minded Indian family that this is what you have to do in life, and she's fighting back against that. Her boyfriend, who she thought would be the one she would get married to based on the horoscope, ends up cheating on her. And so she finds a different path for herself in life. And it's really funny. It's so fun to read. Nisha herself is such a fun author. And so that book is an absolute fabulous book. So yeah, that's a definite go-to that I definitely recommend to everyone, whoever asks me anyway.
Yeah.
So let's see if there are any other questions. I think it's just a comment. I should have added that not everyone in Canada is close to a local bookstore, which has everything a reader wants. I actually agree with you, Linda. It's true. I mean, I live in Mississauga. It's kind of tough to get to a local independent bookstore, especially during nowadays in this pandemic. When you have to go and take public transit, sometimes you can't take public transit because for various health reasons or whatever. So I think you can just do the best that you can.
Right, exactly. And in most independent bookshops, Another Story included, are able to deliver. Obviously shipping can be expensive, but usually if you find your local bookshop, they'll be able to send something to you. Might not be like within the next 5 hours like Amazon is able to do, but usually they're able to do it within a reasonable time frame. So there is that option. But yeah, I definitely understand like remote places, it can be very difficult to accessibility, access to a lot of books can be hard. So yeah, exactly. Just as best as you can. Yeah.
Do your best.
Yeah.
And I think that is it for our questions. Thank you so much, Khary, for joining us today. It was such a
Yeah.
pleasure talking to you about
Yeah,
bookstore and
absolutely.
about books. For anyone who joined us a bit late, with us today was Khary Mathurin from Another Story Bookshop. The link to the bookstore webpage is available in the chat, so be sure to check them out online. And please join us tomorrow on August the 29th to celebrate Canadian Independent Bookstore Day. You can follow along the celebration at Penguin Random CA on Twitter and the hashtag CIBD. Shop online or safely in store to show your love and support for your local independent bookstores tomorrow. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.